So as a kid, I was always the kid asking why. I was very curious. I took apart my father's lawnmower while he was at work, completely. I took the piston out. I was about 11. And I almost put it back together before he got home. So when he came home, of course, there were a few parts that weren't back together yet. And he said, "Why did you do this?" And I said, "I want to see how it worked." And he helped me put it back together. He's a mechanic, and I think he loved the fact that I was digging into hands-on stuff. So that's kind of how I was as a kid. And I always liked math, like physics, like sciences in general. And when I was growing up, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was my dream. In my junior year, I applied to the Air Force Academy. I went for an eye test here at Mass Eye and Ear and royally flunked. So I have a lazy muscle in my eye. I've had that my whole life. And the doctor was kind. He just said, "Kid, you're never going to fly." So I just pivoted and said, "Okay, what am I going to do?" And I looked in the newspaper, and there were lots of jobs for electrical engineers. This is back when computer chips were, there was fierce competition from lots of companies for different types of chips, different types of computers. So I thought maybe I'll go to school for electrical engineering and apply my interest in math and physics. And had a great time, went to WPI for that. But my sister had died. My younger sister died at 13 years old, accidentally, when I was in my junior year of college, excuse me. And it really wrecked the family. So my parents, they never really got over it. And I took control of setting up the funeral and taking care of all the arrangements. And when there's trouble, I run to it. I don't run away from it. And I knew after she had passed away that I wanted to do something with my life to help people. That's really where it stems from. So it was my way of trying to figure out, how do I manage this, this tragic event and turn it into a positive? Because, if I let it get to me, I'm too young to have my life revolve around a tragedy. This first job, which was an internship turned into a real job, was with the company of one person. It was a reference lab. So what they do is they take specimens from hospitals and do lab tests. And they do lab tests that hospitals aren't set up to do. There was a lab director, there was a lab tech, and me. So what did I do? I set up water filtration systems. I set up QC plans, QC doing statistics on the lab equipment to make sure the lab results were accurate. We needed a computer system. All we had was a connection to somebody else's computer system. So we had a construction team build out a computer room, but everything in the computer room I built. So I did everything except for the physical room, cooling, and electricity. Everything else I did myself. There wasn't a computer science degree in those days, but I knew computers and operating systems. So I brought that in. We hired more lab techs. We went to 24-hour operations. So we went from having 3 people to 200 people in about a year and a half to 2 years. So when I started at the lab and we brought in a computer system, it happened to be using a database from a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. So some of the listeners may remember DEC back from the 70s and 80s, and they were acquired by Compaq, and then Compaq was acquired by HP. But when I had a failure in the database, I called DEC, and this happened many times. So I knew the person I really wanted to talk to was an engineer called Fred. It's a real person. I'm not going to share his last name on the podcast. But to get to Fred took 4 hours to get through DEC's support processes, where you had to identify yourself as an authorized person to call for support in the first place. You had to share information about your support contract to basically prove that you're a customer. You had to describe the problem, typically a few times, to different people. And then they would categorize it and put it into a bucket. Now, my system's down. I think it's a crisis. But I have to go through and explain this to people who don't really understand my system. They don't understand my business. They were polite, which was nice. But the whole process was really ineffective. When I got to Fred, Fred always helped me out. We solved the problem working together, and I was very happy and thankful that Fred was there to help. That was interesting. I thought that's the way the world works. We moved to an InterSystems database, which was fully compatible with a digital database. So moving from one to the other was actually very easy. And, something went wrong. And I called InterSystems. They didn't ask for anything. They asked for my first name. That was about it. I described the problem. The person on the phone said, "Wait a minute, let me look something up." And he said, about 5 minutes later, he said, "Okay, try this. Make a change in this location of memory and put this value in, then reboot the system." So I do that, and the reboot would take, we take it for granted, our phones boot up in like 3 seconds, right? For these systems, it would take about 3-4 minutes, not terribly long, but enough time to go get a cup of coffee and come back. And then once it was up, I'd have to double check and see that the problem was really fixed. So I'd have to run some tests before I'd let users back onto the system. This whole time, this person I called at InterSystems stayed on the phone with me. And he was very patient, and he just waited. He wanted to make sure that what he recommended really worked. I didn't feel like he was rushed to close the ticket. He didn't double check that we're a customer and we're paying for support. He didn't check on any of that, which was seemed quite odd to me because I wasn't used to it. And lo and behold, the problem was solved. And so I had 3 or 4 other events like that where I called, and I get the same person every time. And I thought, gee, this must be the support person who picks up the phone. I wrote down his name. His name was Terry Reagan. I don't know who he is. And then later, as I was applying for a job at InterSystems, but I came into the office to meet with InterSystems and go through a couple of interviews, which I did. And the floor wasn't very big and only had maybe 15 people on the floor at full capacity. And I walk into Terry Reagan's office and realize I had been talking to the CEO of InterSystems all along. And that really threw me off. And as I went into his office, I was stepping over paint buckets. I'm not kidding, because Terry was painting his office. And we had a nice discussion. It didn't seem like an interview. It seemed like a discussion. But I realized after I thought about everything he said and everything he asked, he was really digging deep and getting a lot of interesting information out of me. I thought it was going to be, tell me what your skills are, and then test my skills and what experience did I have. He didn't ask anything like that. He asked about how do I learn, and I said, learn sometimes by making mistakes. After the interview, I thought, oh, that's the wrong thing to say. But for Terry, it was the right thing to say because I wasn't afraid to make a mistake and learn from it. He asked about my passions, and I told him about my passion for helping people, where that came from. He asked me about my aspirations. I said, I want to own my own company. I want to work here for 5 years, and then I'm going to go off and start my own business. And later I thought, I was young. I thought that was a really bad thing to say. And the things I thought were really bad answers, as I'm reflecting on this, saying there's no way he's going to hire me. Within a few hours after the meeting, I got a call and they wanted to hire me, and I was amazed. There were 2 other people in support, so I was the 3rd support person. The company only had 17 people. So again, everybody's doing everything. We didn't have a QA department. We didn't have a training department. First day in the job, I remember I printed out all of our source code and took it home to read it. It was a stack of paper about this big. Yeah. There was coffee and beer on the paper. And, and Sunday mornings, I'd spend the whole morning just reading through source code to try to understand how the product really works. So it was an opportunity to learn a lot, and I did. And then as we hired more people, I realized I'm turning into a teacher too. So I can learn and help other people. And mentoring other people coming into the company, helping our customers. All of a sudden, I was feeling that fulfillment that I was looking for to balance out that tragedy a few years prior. And it was really felt good.